Welcome to Hot Topic, the programme that brings you the controversial, the political and the provocative in East Yorkshire and Northern Lincolnshire. Today I'm joined by two people representing organisations that offer a helping hand to those who need it in our region. Maria Tompkinson is here from Care Plus Group, and John Mooney from VANEL, the Voluntary Action North East Lincolnshire. Both of you, welcome. Maria, first of all, can you just tell us the history of your organisation and what it does?
Care Plus Group came into being in July 2011. We came off as a spin-off from the National Health Service, and we provide adult health and social care within North East Lincolnshire.
And the same question to John.
Voluntary Action is an umbrella group which provides infrastructure support for all of the voluntary and community sector organisations in North East Lincolnshire, particularly our membership, and we also run the Volunteer Bureau on Town Hall Street, which brokers volunteers into organisations that are looking to have people help them do things.
So you're a sort of an exchange of volunteers.
That's the way the volunteer centre works, yeah.
Now, a lot of the people you help, again, there's going to be an overlap between the two. Maria, who are your customers, as it were? Who do you provide help for?
The majority of our customers are vulnerable adults, and those people with learning disabilities, physical disabilities, so those that are needing the most vulnerable in a community who need health and support. So it's healthcare that we provide as well as social support as well.
Why only adults? What have you got against children?
There's other services, obviously, within the area. We provide services to children.
Now, you mentioned various things. There are all sorts of vulnerabilities these adults might have. It's health and social care in order to keep them healthy and sociable. What are the problems that you find yourselves coming against time and time again? Well, North East Lincolnshire's your patch.
Yes.
Do you find that this is a noticeably teetotal part of the world? Or do people here drink?
Well, I think it's like every area in the country, isn't it? There's a number of problems. Obviously, we've got our services but provide support for people with drug and alcohol dependencies. But there's also the complex changing needs of the society as well. As the society, population is getting older, you're finding that the people are getting more, complex health needs that require support from ourselves.
And how do you come across these people? How do they come to you, or how do you come to them?
Some of those are from what we do is obviously we're providing services that are which are commissioned in the area. So we provide nursing, the community nursing, and Meals on Wheels services, and all those things which have traditionally perhaps been seen as being provided by the NHS and the councils. So the come through us from a variety of routes. We help people once they're released from hospital by providing short-term care and support.
Is it only people released from hospital, or people who are...
No, it's to prevent people going in hospital as well, to help provide that support that people need within the community. So there's a whole range of services that we will provide. It's about raising awareness and preventative matters as well through the likes of our collaborative support services.
And who pays for you?
The majority of our funding comes from NHS funding and also funding for adult social care from the local authorities.
Who are your clients? Who do your volunteers help?
Volunteers help right across the board. I mean, from youth organisations to horticultural organisations to people who are giving help to the isolated elderly. I suppose one of the things that people think about when they think about volunteering is people working in charity shops and those sorts of things, and that's part of the process, but it's a heck of a lot wider than that. And if you are looking to do something useful in your community, then I'm sure we can find something that will actually suit your talents or your enthusiasms. So if you wanted to get involved, we could find something for you.
There's a distinction, or it's not quite the same thing to volunteer to go gardening as it is to go and volunteer to be a carer for a vulnerable old lady.
I think the actual physical care of the vulnerable, unless your family or whatever, is not something that you would be expected to do as a volunteer. It would be more a befriending process, and somebody who you could sort of rely on to come and talk to you on a regular basis and those sorts of things. So it's more the social aspect than the sort of medical care aspect, and I don't think volunteers should be expected to sort of step into that particular role.
And what sort of people do you find walking through your doors and saying they're putting their hands up and saying they're willing to help?
Everybody from all walks of life, from people who do fairly sort of straightforward manual jobs to sort of solicitors and other people who want to do something useful in their community, or indeed set something up themselves where they feel that there's a gap in the area in which they live to sort of do something that needs doing.
Both organisations are looking after people who, for one reason or another, are not capable of looking after themselves. Have you found, either of you, have you found that the number of people who need help has been growing in recent years since the economy's taken a tumble?
I think there's an expectation from our point of view that with the changes to benefits and the reduction in the amount of money that's available to provide service, then a lot of that will fall on voluntary and community service organisations to try and fill the gap. So you've got an increase in things like food banks and those sorts of things. Now that's right across the country, that's not just locally. But I suppose some of us find the idea that in a country that I think is probably the 7th richest in the world, that we're actually having to provide food banks to sort of give food to people is a real problem. But the fact that volunteers are stepping up to do that, I think, is a good thing and says a lot of positive things about our community as well.
The true die-hard liberal would argue that the 7th richest country in the world might well be providing food banks because the riches belong to the people who are capable of creating the riches, not the people who aren't capable of feeding themselves.
I suppose I'm more left-leaning than a lot of the die-hard liberals.
I merely put the argument.
Well, I suppose the process from my point of view is that some people could be regarded as having hived off more than they are due to, using methods that sort of verge on the immoral, at least, even if not the criminal. And so some of the things that we've seen about sort of people in high places getting massive amounts of money for sort of failing in banks and other organisations, you start to wonder where the wealth should be spread.
I hadn't realised that Vinnell was such a revolutionary organisation.
There's just a few members of it, I suppose.
Maria, how about your organisation? Have you noticed that you've needed to deploy more resources since the economy went bad?
I believe because we provide services to people who are elderly, because obviously the population is growing older, that's why there's been a need for an increase of our services. And what you're seeing is obviously the complex needs are increasing as well.
And so what sort of numbers of people are you treating at them?
I would say there's approximately about 11,000 people who we're supporting at any one given time.
And that's 11,000 people in North East Lincolnshire out of a population of about 160,000 or so?
It is, but obviously we can provide support to any one of those individuals at any one
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Maria. We must have a break here. In the second half, we'll be coming back to Canon Andrew Dodd of Grimsby Minster, Esther Smith of Communities Together, and Jane Bacon, an independent volunteer. See you then. Bye.
Find out what's top of the Sports Discussion League this week. Join the team for new episodes of On the Bench, Tuesdays at 6.
Welcome back to Hot Topic. In this half, I'm joined by Esther Smith of the Independent Police Advisory Group, by Jane Bacon of Communities Together, and by Canon Andrew Dodd of Grimsby Minster. Welcome, all of you. Thank you very much for being here. Esther, can I ask, first of all, your organisation, what does it do?
The organisation that I chair is the Independent Advisory Group, which is based in Grimsby, but it looks after North East Lincolnshire. And what it does is, after the murder of Stephen Lawrence, who you may remember from some years back,
of course, yes.
He was a black man that was at the bus stop and he was attacked fatally. And there was an investigation and a report came out by Macpherson, what was called the Macpherson report, where the police was seen to be institutionally racist. So one of the recommendations was that the police created an independent advisory group, and that was going to be their critical friend to help them along, with some of the failures that they'd had.
And you're the critical friend of the Humberside Police Force, specifically in North East Lincolnshire.
That's right.
And what's your criticism of your friend, as it were? Is there a problem of racism in the Humberside Police Force?
Well, in terms of the work that we do, we actually work very, very hard together to make sure that we eliminate racism. And any reports of any minority group that are being not treated appropriately by local communities, that's reported immediately. And we are able to work together with Humberside Police, and in particular my local command unit, and we look at the data, the information, we look at investigations and make sure that the policies and the practices within the police force are what they should be. Are
incidents frequent?
Not that frequent in terms of the Macpherson. But however, I do work with Communities Together also, which Jane and Noah will allude to.
I was going to introduce Jane Bacon and Communities Together. Perhaps you could introduce Communities Together.
Well, Communities Together is a local charity that's based on engaging with Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups, and actually works in conjunction with Esther and the DIAG, because we're represented on the hate crime group, which is Safer and Stronger Communities and Humberside Police and other public sector bodies, and we monitor the hate crime statistics and look at incidents and how we can work with local communities to increase local safety. And we've been doing that for approximately the past 12 years. We have an executive group that's also encompasses the public sector.
I must bring Andrew Dodd in a moment, forgive me, Canon, but it's worth pointing out that North East Lincolnshire, Northern Lincolnshire generally, ethnically is pretty bland. There's not a great deal of mixture of peoples here. Could you just give us an idea, perhaps Esther, give us an idea of, we might think it's less cosmopolitan than it really is up here.
Yes, it is. It is actually quite a very low percentage. I think it's under 4% or thereabouts. And but the other thing is, when you're looking at the makeup, there's also the Eastern Europeans, certain other groups that maybe the average person may not see them as minority groups, but they actually clearly are. Just because their colour of the skin is not different, it doesn't mean that they're not treated as part of the minority group.
But then there's some sort of irrational resentment when you hear an exotic accent.
Absolutely.
Okay. Andrew Dodd, what's your involvement with this? There's an ecumenical group that works within Grimsby.
Well, very much so, and we do support the work that's going on about making sure that issues of diversity and also particularly prejudice are highlighted, and we do our best to make sure that those things are named for what they are, and we're able to go and deal with them appropriately. But also we work as an interfaith group as well, actually, to make sure that people who are representing different religions, and perhaps they might come from different parts of the world, actually also have a voice and are able to talk together, and people of faith can actually address these issues and do something about tackling them.
What about, for instance, somebody who's come here from Krakow or Gdansk without any faith?
Well, that might happen from time to time, and of course...
This is the land of Immanuel Kant, after
it
all.
Might very well be indeed, but equally they might also want to meet up with their Polish community friends in the particular Catholic church that they're in, and we would have some contact and some support with them as well.
And we do work with the local Polish school. They have a school on a Saturday for Polish children.
Right.
So we have contact through them to engage. And for instance, we're having Holocaust Memorial commemoration at Grimsby Institute, and we will obviously have participants or an audience who include the various diverse groups from different ethnic communities.
BAME, just remind me what that means, what that stands for.
It's Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. So
Right.
it actually encompasses really, you know, quite a lot of different people. But the other thing is that I think it's quite important that we make clear is communities together is for all of us together. And so just because you're not from the BAMI community,
BAMI,
it doesn't
sorry.
mean that you're not actually part of the communities together. We're wider than that. And you know, some of the work that we do with Andrew through Communities Together and the Institute here, it is a total community you know, working group.
And you have a variety of events going on that are involving the church, involving the Minster, involving the... Just give me a little calendar of events throughout the year, of what activities people can take part in to get involved with this.
If I can give you an example, the first one next year will be working with schools for something called D-Factor for Diversity. It's the third year that this work's been done with schools in conjunction with other local partners. So, for instance, Communities Together and CERCO, which is the educational organisation that works with the authority. And it showcases the work that schools are doing on focusing on difference and how we celebrate difference.
Right.
And we had an evening earlier in this year of classical Indian music, for example, where we actually went and raised issues about cultural diversity as well in the town. And we used the Minster for an evening where we celebrated with dance and music and food, and it was a wonderful occasion.
It's a magnificently admirable civilization, but a little bit of classical Indian music goes quite a long way, doesn't it?
It does indeed, yes, yes.
But unlike classical Indian food, which is always perhaps more familiar to our,
But it's
our
a way of
cultural
encouraging
taste.
people to come in, so that was what was good
Quite.
about that.
Canon, you wanted to say something about the food bank.
Yes, the Daily Bread food larder that we have in Grimsby, and it was one of the issues that we were thinking about as a hot topic, and people were talking about what made them really angry, for example, and we were talking about Peaks Parkway and driving offensive. What makes me really angry in Grimsby is the fact that people these days are having to go in their droves to pick up food parcels from CARE, which is Christian organisation on Freeman Street, because they can't feed their families at the moment because of the benefit cuts and so-called welfare reforms that are happening in our community.
Infuriating, but perhaps also rather pleasing that people are providing food for the food bank as well. I mean, so where's this food coming from?
Well, there are about 40 churches that are supporting it, and we have collections of food in our churches. We also go to supermarkets on particular days where we have volunteers who are asked to ask people as they go into the supermarket to donate food as they come out from it. And I think Jane recently went and gave a donation at one of those supermarkets where we were having a collection. So.
And I also heard that a couple had actually given a whole trolley load of food because they said they weren't buying Christmas presents for anyone this year,
Right.
so they were donating a trolley full of food.
Well, it's very admirable to be charitable rather than celebratory, but there's a sort of puritanical Scrooge-like element there to be giving things away rather than having a party at Christmas? Or am I being unkind?
I think you might be being a little unkind because people are genuinely having to face real choices about whether they feed themselves or their children, let alone getting presents these days. And we're hearing numerous stories about people who are really having to deal with those hard-edged decisions. And so charity has to begin at home these days.
In that case, I withdraw my unkind remarks. Thank you very much, Canon. And thank you very much for watching Hot Topic. If you have any stories or issues that you'd like to get in touch with us about, then the details of communication are right below. But for now, thank you very much. Goodbye.